My name is Carmen Polhemus. Our son, Daniel Martin Polhemus, was a successful organ donor of both kidneys, his liver, and his pancreas. Probably the main thing I want to say to start off is that I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about Daniel. Losing a child, particularly, I think from my reading and from talking with other parents that have lost children, is extremely painful. And one of the things that helps is to be able to talk about them and have people say their name. So I have always appreciated Tosa. There are times I think Tosa knows Daniel as well as some of the people here in Wimberley. Through the years, people have let me tell stories, have let me tell anecdotes, have listened to all the tales that a mom likes to tell. The donation experience, second to our faith, has been the most comfort of anything that we've had. I had no idea it would last for so many years. Tosa has been tremendous, but also the fact that Daniel does live on through others. Daniel's favorite saying was, "I got your back." To me, what I've learned through the years is organ donation is the ultimate "I got your back." And it just seems like it was a match for Daniel. Let me start with how it all began. My husband Paul and I have 3 sons. Daniel has 2 older brothers. Daniel was adopted, which was a very, very special experience for all of us. Let me tell you about the accident, because I think that will put it in perspective. It was a really, really bright, beautiful January day. It was that kind of day in Texas where the sky is just blue, blue, blue. The sun was out, it was warm, and it just seemed like nothing could go wrong on a day like that. It was about 2:30 in the afternoon. Daniel, I don't know if you're familiar with Wimberley or not, but we're in the hill country. And Daniel was on one of our more winding roads. He pulled out to pass a car. We later found out it was a friend, and they were kind of speeding. There was no drugs, no drinking, but they were playing like teenage guys would play with their cars. As Daniel was pulling out to pass, he came upon a blind hill. There was another car coming from the other direction. Daniel slowed down, whipped in behind his friend's car, hit the shoulder, hit the gravel, started to spin, and hit a tree. Just like that. It was that fast. It was seconds. When Daniel hit the tree, he hit on the passenger side, and there was really no injury to Daniel in terms of physical. It was all inside his brain, is what I want to say. He had what is comparable to in a baby called shaken baby syndrome, or where the brain just rattled in his head. The EMS and everybody got there real fast. They were able to intubate him at the scene, and they used Starflight to get him to the hospital. What was really hard for us as parents is we were in HEB shopping. We never knew it happened. For some reason, our phones didn't work in HEB, because when we got home, we found messages on what was then a landline, but our cell phones hadn't recorded anything. I'm not real sure why. What started from that moment on is we had driven in from HEB, and when we came the corner to our home, there was a deputy and a highway patrol car in our driveway. My husband said he knew right away that something had happened, because that doesn't happen all the time, that you have deputy and highway patrol. Myself, and this is one of the times that I try and make it easier on audiences, is after raising 3 sons, it wasn't the first deputy car we had in our driveway. So I was totally surprised. We got out of the car, The highway patrolman says, your son's been in an accident. You need to get to the hospital in Austin right away. Immediately, I started pouring out questions. Did he have the seatbelt on? Did the airbags go off? Whatever. And he couldn't tell me anything. So this by now is about 5:30, and Daniel wouldn't. I mean, we didn't even know what situation he was in, other than they said we got to get to the hospital. The reason I make such a point of the activities leading up to us going to the hospital is it's really important for people to understand that donor families don't usually plan on being donor families. Yes, you can register, you can have your children registered, but you don't ever really think you're going to have to do it. Now, we had not registered, and we definitely had not registered Daniel. But it happens so quickly. And I think it's really important for people dealing with donor families to realize that they never dreamed they were really going to have to make this decision, or what even leads up to making the decision. We got in our car and began to try. By this time in January, it's dark. And we took off for the hospital. The expressway was extremely backed up, as most people familiar with I-35 know. So we took off going the back roads, and we hit a flat tire. So Paul got out to change the tire and stuff. I went ahead and called the hospital to talk. He was already in ICU and went through the trauma part and was in ICU. And I called them, and they believed who I was. Because of my past work, I'm familiar with HIPAA, and I will always bless the nurse that talked to us. And I asked her, I said, I'm Carmen Polimas. I'm calling about our son, Daniel. I need to know how bad his concussion is. And because she recognized who I was, and also I had a nephew already there that could verify I was the mom, she said, "Oh, Miss Polimas, it's not a concussion. It's a cranial bleed 4, intracranial bleed 4. Because of my work with people with disabilities, I knew what that meant. I knew it was very, very serious. So when Paul got in the car and we were able to continue our drive, I was able to explain to him that probably what we were going to be looking at was very, very wrong, that there was going to be multiple problems. So we got to the ICU, and I always, and people have told me this nurse is actually still working, but he was a very, very tall man. And he came out and he probably said one of the things that nurses are trained to say, but it has to be very hard. He said, "You'll never have the son back again that you knew before the wreck." That the brain damage was already occurring. The bleed had not stopped. So we went in, we got to see Daniel. He looked just like he was sleeping. There was no disfigurement or injury there. And that begins what I have called the worst and the most wonderful week of my life. And the hospital staff was so patient in answering questions and numbers, explaining what the numbers meant, explaining what the levels meant. On a Wednesday night, our physician came up, and he's a very prayerful Christian man. And so we were all in the waiting room, and he led us in a prayer. There's a large group of us. Those of you that have been around teenagers when they're in the hospital know that they just flock to be close to their friend. And as I've said before, Daniel was a friend's friend. When he said, "I got your back," there were some backs I think he could have left alone, but he was kind of a person who just loved people unconditionally. And so he did have a lot of friends. So we were in a large circle saying our prayer. And the physician said, "And dear God, please let Daniel heal cell by cell." So the next morning, which was Thursday, we went to meet. And by this time I was asking to meet with this wonderful, wonderful nurse practitioner. I could not talk with the neurologists anymore because they were a little firmer. They were a little bit more realistic than I could handle. and Laura was her name. I'll always remember her. She was just easier to talk to. And so we talked with her, and she was giving us the morning update. And she said, Carmen, it's between God and Daniel now. And after the physician had called that Daniel could heal cell by cell, that phrase was in my mind. And she said, it's between God and Daniel now, and it's cell by cell. And I got, with typical mother optimism, I looked at Paul and said, sweetheart, it's working. The prayer's already working. He's healing cell by cell. And Laura was able to say, Carmen, no, we're losing him cell by cell. That was the first time, even though I cognitively had always understood that blood kills brain cells. That was the first time it really hit me in my heart that that's what happens with concussions, and that's what happens with, traumatic brain injury or whatever, is that the blood is killing brain cells, and that's what was happening. So Paul and I walked down the hall a little bit and realized it was time for decisions. Turned around and asked Laura, went back and asked Laura, what are our options? What do we do from here? We met and sat with her. She explained to us how long Daniel would live off of life support. Their estimation would be less than 2 minutes. She listed off how long he might last if we moved him to a nursing home. I had worked my whole professional life to get people with disabilities out of nursing homes. I would not put our own child into a nursing home. She pretty well let us know that we can only stay in the hospital another 10 days. So as we were going through all of this, I said, well, there's only one thing I want. I said, I have to have, and I'm using I because I'm the most verbal in Paul and I's relationship, but we never left each other. Even when we were apart, we didn't leave each other. He was in on all the discussions. And I said, though, but what I needed was to be in the room with Daniel when the machines go off, because I wanted that peace. I wanted to know he was safe and he was at peace and he wasn't hurting. And I just needed to have that closure. And she said, oh, well, then I guess you can't be a donor. Daniel can't be a donor. And at that moment, the best way I can describe it is the room filled with light. It was a pretty drab hospital conference room kind of setting, but it was like, well, of course. It was just, all of a sudden, it was just so clear that what Daniel needed to do was to be a donor. And I knew it was what Daniel wants. So they set us up with someone from Tulsa. His name was Keith. Tremendous man. The intake process for Tulsa was one of the most family-friendly, sincere, caring interchanges. Paul had to answer all the questions. I couldn't answer the questions about what we would or wouldn't be able to donate. And we just held hands, and Keith would say, how about this? And I'd squeeze his hand and Paul would answer yes. We said yes to everything. The option that was the very last option was Keith asked if we would participate in a research study that if Daniel's pancreas was able to be shared, there was a study at UCLA where if you took one cell from a healthy pancreas and injected it into a person that was dependent on insulin, a diabetic person who is dependent on insulin, it wouldn't cure them, but it would take away the need to be on daily insulin. So we said yes. We said yes, we would do that. And as it turned out, Daniel was able to donate both his kidneys, his liver, in his pancreas. So Daniel's pancreas went to UCLA and participated. His cells were procured to be able to step into this research study. My thinking is when our prayer went up on that Wednesday night for Daniel to heal cell by cell, part of that was his pancreas going to UCLA. But when I think of the thousands of people that Daniel's life touched because of his pancreas going to be part of research, I'm overwhelmed with God's goodness, his grace, his direction. So since then, we've been involved in TOSA. We have attended things, we've talked. It is a great comfort to know what's going on with TOSA now, because it's remarkable. It's remarkable. I totally support all the program's goals and try to give back whenever we can, because we have been given much.